And we're going to switch perspective a little bit now. We're going to talk about representation in another way. And again, we're going to switch the focus to a more technological view of representation. And we're going to talk about the technology, computer-generated imagery, so the way we can kind of create people digitally, and to kind of talk about this for us. And this is, of course, a new type of real. And of course, computers are really good at creating, or people are really good with computers creating those images. So what does that do with realness and truth, and how we can distinct that? And so we're going to hear from or actually, I have some notes, I have some small things to say. I forgot about that. So this is a mirror. So speaking before about Trisha Wong's presentation at the conference, and where she mentioned some of the technologies that we've been thinking of as like truth. So one of the technologies that she mentioned was the mirror, which was like when that was invented, now we can see ourselves exactly how we are. But we all know that in American cars, there is a sign on the mirror that says objects might seem closer than they appear. So it turns out that that mirrors was also like a flawed representation of the truth. And the other technology that she mentions is linear perspective, which was kind of explored during the Renaissance. And so this was like when we could actually like paint the real picture of how the world looks. This is, of course, a kind of a bad example, because this is not, we don't know if this ever happened, and the artist certainly didn't see it happen. But imagine like a Renaissance painting landscape, now we could like see the real deal. And this is, of course, like pre-photography. So this technology was kind of a truth machine. And I just got this link from a friend to an exhibition in Munich. And currently, of course, there is an exhibition called Thrill of Deception. And like literally like the first line in the catalog reads, "We can no longer rely on the evidence of our eyes alone to kind of to see if something is real or not." And I think that our next speaker is going to make that very obvious for us. So our next speaker is Beatrice Harty. And when she's not here with us, she works as a 3D character artist at the game developer Massive Entertainment. And here she's going to talk, as I said, about computer-generated imagery, and kind of show us what this technology can do and what it makes with our perception of real.
Absolutely.
Welcome, Bea.
Thank you so much. And good to see you all. Thanks for coming. So I would like to start off with telling you a story about a friend that I made once. And it wasn't anything too specific about this man at first. He was this slightly roughy-looking guy that seemed to know a lot about the world and the people in it, and he was quite happy to talk about it. And as we got to know each other a little bit better, he would tell me about his hopes and his dreams about the future, and how he maybe thought that I could help him a little bit with shaping that. And I really thought that we could do some great stuff together, him and I. Really change the world a little bit in our own way. But that was up until one day. I stopped by while in town. He had his little house in the city, and I stopped by. And he told me that he needed to go away, and it was all very sudden. And he left me a spare key to his house. He said I could use it as my own while he was gone, and just like that, he really was gone. And, you know, I took care of his house. I made sure everything was okay, that everything was taken care of. But it still wouldn't come back, and I was kind of checking on the house more rarely and more rarely. There was no letter, no note, nothing. And I didn't really know what happened, what made him go away in such a haste. So as the days went by, I kind of started to get on with my life, and never quite knowing what happened with him. Why did he have to leave? And I would still, like, every now and then remember him and the good conversations that we had, and feel kind of sad over the friend that all of a sudden disappeared. So, as it is, this character was a man called Chaos Crusadus in a game called Morrowind that I used to play a lot in my younger days. And this experience and other experience like it is definitely part of what made me want to create games and characters myself. And there's a lot of thought and things that it goes into creating a digital character, right? There's the pure art of it. What is aesthetically pleasing to look at? What clothes does the character wear and how do they wear them? What colors do they use and how does that affect us when we're looking at them? And then there's a technical aspect of it as well, right? There's how does the skin reflect light for it to look as it does in real life? How do we convey the depth in the eyes? How do we make the eyes move in a natural way and so on? And all these little pieces come together to create what we see on the screens. So, what I wanted to say is that this CGI or computer-generated images has come a really long way in recent years. And it has become really hard, if not sometimes even like downright impossible for us to actually spot the difference. And it hasn't always been the case though. Is anyone familiar with the term Uncanny Valley? I see a few nods, so I'm gonna take it as a few of you, at least. It's basically a term that we'll use for when we portray something very visually realistic, but it comes off a little bit weird. It gets a little bit uncanny. And it's basically, we as human beings, we start off very early, even as babies, we look at other people's faces to read emotions, well-being, so on. It's kind of a defense mechanism. We want to see if they can be a threat to us or not. So we're very, very good at doing this. And while we might not think about it much consciously, there's a big flow of information happening subconsciously. And let's say that we, for instance, we're watching something that is very stylized. It's very far away from what we perceive as reality, something like a cartoon. That is far enough from reality that our brain is saying that this is not real. So we tend to accept that things might not necessarily behave as they would in real life, because it's not real anyway, right? And as we start to depict things more and more realistic, we also tend to experience it as more real, and also tend to feel more empathy and emotional connection with these characters as well. So this curve goes up right until the point where we cannot really tell the difference between what's real and not anymore. And that is where we have this big dip called Uncanny Valley, where it's very real, it looks real, and our brain is telling us this is real. But something is a little bit off. And it could be something as small as how often the character blinks. How does the facial muscles behave when they talk, and the blood flow of those facial muscles. There's even some research done recently that shows that we subconsciously, when we're looking at a person's face, we can actually spot the coloration on the skin of pulse, which is super cool, and is definitely nothing that we would think about doing, right? But it's enough that something so small like that is off, and immediately, our brains just starts to blare these alarms saying like, this person that we're looking at is maybe sick or in some way might pose a threat to us, and it becomes weird to look at and uncanny. But we have gotten quite far with this. It's a young industry. CGI in general is very young still, but we have gotten quite far, and I wanted to show you 2 quick examples of how that could look like. Let's see what video comes first here. Let's see, here we go. So this is the actor Andy Serkis. I think most of you might be familiar with him from The Lord of the Rings, playing Gollum. So this is a showcase done in Unreal Engine, showing how we can capture an actor's performance and put that into a digital character. And it's a pretty cool looking alien, right? So just out of curiosity, can anyone spot that his face is also CGI, not just the alien? Right. So it's not too bad, right? It's not too bad. And here's another one that has been circulating a lot. So there's of course no audio right now, but if there would have been, you would have heard that he would say some very uncharacteristic things for Barack Obama. And that is, of course, because this is not Barack Obama. This is a digital double of him created by a man called Jordan Peele that was mixing AI with CG imagery to kind of create this version of Obama. So, yeah, I think we can do a pretty convincing job nowadays. And of course, there's another kind of important topic lurking around the corner with all of this, which would be sort of the big trouble that we can run into when we have an easy time to portray people doing or saying things that they wouldn't do or haven't done in real life, especially with someone with big influence on society, like the example with Barack Obama here. But I don't want to linger too much on that. I do think that we will be able to reverse engineer it, if you will. When we can create something, we can reverse engineer it. We will have an easier time detecting these things. And CGI is so integrated into our society already that it's kind of better to look ahead and work with what's ahead of us. It's not like we can say, stop, we're not using CGI anymore. We have to work with it instead. So, we have CGI all around us, right? We have the obvious ones as the movies, we have video games, we have commercials, we have our applications in our phones, where we can change the look on our face in the WhatsApp filters if you have used those. But there's also some kind of maybe not that obvious ones. I know that if we go to Instagram, I know of at least 2 influencers on Instagram that has quite a lot of followers as well. I think one has something like 45,000 followers, the other one something like 1.5 million, that are not real people. They are digitally created characters or models, if you will. And they have collaborations with brands and great careers going for them, considering that they not actually exist. And we have, just the other day, actually, I don't know if you have seen this, Carlings, the clothing store. I guess you all know of Carlings, right? They said that they are going out with a new collection called Neo X that is going to be only digital. So the idea here is that you buy an item of their collection. You send them a picture of yourself, and a 3D artist will fit the item to your body, and it will look like you wear the item in real life. So now you have the option of showing off to all your friends on social media your new clothing without actually having to own them in real life. Fancy that, right? So we have made great progress. And we have made great progress with real-time rendered characters as well, and digital worlds. And with real-time, I'm talking about things like video games and other interactive media. Something that is pre-rendered, sort of the opposite of that, would be something like a movie, where you traditionally can cram a little bit more of a heavy tech into it. They have the luxury of computing a single frame for many, many hours. Whilst a video game, we have to update something like 30 frames per second. So it's quite a big difference. And also, a pre-rendered movie decides where we're going to look in a scene. If we have a scene with, let's say we have this computer here and this box here, right? This is the scene that we're looking at. If it's a movie, I can turn my camera and you will look at this scene here. And what's outside here, outside of the scene, I don't even have to make that because I won't let you look there in the first place, right? If it's a video game, we know that you will walk around in the room. You will go over there, you will go over here, you might go into the other room, you might even sit down behind the box, crawl underneath the chair just because you can. So we have to make scenes with all of these possibilities in mind and make sure that you can do all of things that you want to do. But I think that's also the beauty of interactive media in general. It's your choices, so it becomes your story and ultimately a little bit of your world. So I would like to come back a little bit to my good old friend Caius Casades that I was talking about earlier. This is what he actually looked like. He is probably not the most convincing CGI character you've ever seen. Not even for its prime time back in 2002, if we're gonna be honest. Sorry, Case, sorry. But I think that when we have an interaction with something, that itself can also make it feel more real. It doesn't matter that much more anymore that it's not that visually real if we have the interaction. And I do personally think that's going to be like a huge part of what brings the virtual world and the real world closer together. Even in the future, we have social media and that whole platform, the social part of internet, that all of this can really come into play. And I think there's something also really interesting that happens when we become an active part in an experience. You are not a passive spectator anymore. You get to choose and see for yourself, and I think it makes for a much more authentic experience, an experience that really can be called your own, in a sense. And I think because of all of this, there's also a great potential in games for you to really experience something different and step into someone else's shoes, if you will. So, for instance, there could be experiences that you might not normally find yourself in. It might also be experience that you wouldn't or couldn't have been able to experience otherwise. And I think there's some great little games out there that really do this in a really nice way. There's one that lets you step into the shoes of someone struggling with gender dysphoria and kind of get a taste of what that can be like on a day-to-day basis. There's another small-scale one that gotten some attention lately called Hair Na that lets you play as a woman of color. And what that game is about is basically you swatting away hands trying to touch your hair all the time, because that is a struggle that many people of color feel like they have to go through on a daily basis. And I could at least, for me as a white woman playing this game, I kind of felt afterwards like, man, I didn't realize that could be so annoying to have people trying to touch your hair and commenting on it all the time. And that I think is definitely what they try to convey as well. That sometimes it's not enough with you just telling someone that, hey, this is like this, and please don't do this, is not good for me. But if you can make them actually get a touch of that experience itself, I think they can understand it in a much more better sense, if you will, and partake in that perspective, really. So, let's see what I wanted to wrap this up with. Right. What I really want to come back into is that all of these experiences with interactive media, with CGI, we can get those, and those can feel very real to us. I know that, this guy, K.S. Crusaders, he was, in a sense, a friend to me while I played that game. And that, I gained something real from talking to him. And even though that was a very kind of primitive type of interaction, that was enough for me to kind of get to feel something, get an emotional connection to him, if you will. And, even though now, almost 20 years later, I still remember the guy, right? So there must have been something. And I had probably friends in real life, thinking back on it, that I remember less from that time, which is kind of interesting. But I think that when we put something of ourselves into it and partake in an experience, we get a little bit more of an emotional value back, just like we would outside of the virtual world, for that matter. I think it's the same thing. And I wouldn't say that these emotions were fake. How could you say that these experiences weren't real, per se? It's just as real as anything else, it's just portrayed with a different medium. And these people and these experiences, they might not always depict something realistic per se, but the experience itself stays real to whoever experiences. And let's see, I think that reality is always something that is very subjective anyway. What makes something real to me might not be what makes something real for the person standing next to me. And ultimately, the only reality I can really prove or disprove as such is my own. And I think that all these experiences, even if they're simulated to a certain extent, they do help us shape our view of the world and our view of the people in it. And it's going to be really exciting to see where CGI and this world is taking us, how it's going to mix in with AI. It's going to be really, really cool. But it's also really cool to just stand up for a little bit, look around, take it in, and kind of see all the amazing things that are right now, where we are right now. And that was probably all for me. So thank you very much for listening.